There are some moments in life that feel less like a memory and more like a scar. A place where everything changed, leaving behind a sharp, permanent outline of before and after. For me, that moment wasn't when my beautiful daughter, Charlotte, was born, or even the day I married her father, Ethan. It was the moment I saw the cold, embossed envelope arrive in the mail, addressed to my baby Charlotte, from a lab I didn't recognize. When I picked it up, I felt a tremor run from my fingertips all the way to my soul. I knew instantly who had sent it. And I knew what she was trying to do. It was the moment I realized that my mother-in-law, a woman I had spent 10 years trying to please, had finally moved from emotional tyranny to calculated, clinical warfare. My name is Clara. I'm a high school art teacher, 41 years old, and a mother to the most wonderful little girl, Charlotte, who at the time was just 6 months old. My life, before the arrival of that envelope, had always been defined by quiet order. I married Ethan, a kind, steady man who works in architecture, when I was 30. We spent years building a comfortable life in a small colonial home filled with the smell of old books and fresh coffee. We weren't wealthy, but we had peace, and for me, that was richer than any inheritance. The one turbulent current in our otherwise calm sea was Eleanor, Ethan's mother. Eleanor was what polite society calls a matriarch, and what I privately considered a grand inquisitor. She wasn't just wealthy. She was old money wealthy, which meant she carried the weight of history and the expectation of perpetual perfection. Her house, the one she shared with Ethan's mild-mannered father, Arthur, was pristine, a cathedral of mahogany, crystal, and silence. My relationship with Eleanor had always been a tightrope walk. She critiqued my cooking by inspecting the leftovers. She questioned my career choice. Art, dear? Is that a sustainable hobby? And she reminded me, constantly, that Ethan was marrying down. But the real conflict began when Charlotte was born. Charlotte was a miracle baby for us after 3 years of trying. She arrived with a shock of deep, wavy black hair, eyes the color of sea glass, and skin that tanned easily. Ethan and I are both fair-skinned, with light brown or blonde hair. Arthur, my father-in-law, had dark hair and eyes, but he wasn't often around, so no one really focused on it. Except Eleanor. When Eleanor first held Charlotte, there was no gentle grandmotherly coo. She just stared, her perfectly manicured hand resting on the baby's dark curls. Black hair, she'd stated, her voice flat, emotionless. No one in the modern family line has had hair this dark. It is striking. She then looked at me, a long, cool gaze that felt like a pinprick, as if searching for a lie on my face. Over the next few months, every visit became a veiled interrogation. She didn't ask, "How is the baby?" but "Has the color of her eyes changed yet?" She'd show me photos of Ethan as a baby, pointing to his almost white hair, then back at my beautiful, dark-haired child. It was subtle, but the implication was a poison she dripped slowly, steadily, into the water of my marriage. Ethan, bless his heart, was oblivious. He'd wave away my anxieties. "Mom just worries about the family line, Clara. It's her generation. She's not trying to hurt you." But I saw the way her words caused him to pause, the flicker of doubt that crossed his face before he suppressed it. The constant questioning chipped away at the trust we had built. One evening, I overheard her on the phone with her sister. I was putting laundry away near the living room door, and Eleanor didn't realize I was home. "It simply doesn't add up, Beatrice. The coloring is too strong. I've had a difficult marriage, you know. I will not allow my only son to be played for a fool. I need to be sure this child belongs here. I need to protect the legacy." The word legacy sounded like a verdict. That night, I watched Ethan sleeping next to me. I thought about the decade we had shared, the promises we made, the pain we went through to have Charlotte. And now, A lifetime of insecurity and family resentment from a woman who valued lineage more than love was threatening to dissolve it all. I felt a surge of defiance. I was a good wife, a dedicated mother, and I had done nothing wrong. I would not allow her to break my family over her own dark suspicions. I just didn't know how far she was prepared to go, until that plain white envelope landed on my kitchen counter a week later. It was a DNA testing kit, sent directly to Charlotte, courtesy of Eleanor. I held the envelope, the thin paper almost dissolving in the tremor of my hand. The return address was a legitimate-sounding lab in a different state. Eleanor hadn't just thought about this. She had meticulously planned it, going outside our local area to prevent us from finding out until it was too late. This wasn't a worried grandmother. This was a general executing a hostile takeover. I immediately called Ethan at his office. I tried to sound calm, but my voice was thin and sharp as glass. "Ethan, I need you to come home. Now. I just received something from your mother." He sighed, the familiar sound of a man caught between two powerful, warring women. "Clara, please. She probably just sent a new cashmere blanket. You know how she is." "No," I insisted, my grip tightening on the paper. "It's a DNA test kit. For Charlotte." Silence. Long, heavy, guilty silence on the other end of the line. Finally he spoke, his voice low and riddled with shame. She mentioned it to me. Weeks ago. She said it was just for genealogy purposes. To see if there were any hidden heritage markers to explain the hair color. The betrayal didn't come from the test itself. It came from his complicity, his silence. Genealogy, Ethan? She is trying to plant a seed of doubt that will destroy our marriage and invalidate our child. And you knew about it? He rushed home, his face pale and lined with stress. When he saw the kit on the counter, he looked utterly defeated. "I told her no, Clara. I swear. I told her it was insulting, ridiculous. But, she just does things. She said she had the right to know for the sake of the family's legacy. I thought she'd drop it." The damage, however, was done. The peace in our home had been shattered by the sound of that envelope hitting the mailbox. The air between us was suddenly thick with unspoken suspicion. I was furious with Eleanor, but I was hurt by Ethan. "What do we do now?" he asked, rubbing his temples, already preparing to appease his mother. I looked down at the infant in my arms, my beautiful, unaware Charlotte, smelling faintly of milk and baby powder. The idea of subjecting her to this ridiculous, invasive test, just to satisfy Eleanor's toxic ego, made my stomach turn. But I also knew the truth. If we refused, Eleanor wouldn't stop. She would simply continue to whisper, to imply, to pollute the family narrative until everyone, including Ethan, believed the worst. Her power lay in the doubt she sowed. "We take the test," I said, the words surprising even myself. My voice was steady now, infused with a cold resolve. "But we do it on our terms. We do it to stop her, not to prove anything to her." I contacted the lab using the kit's unique code, but I insisted on managing the collection process myself, using our own trusted pediatrician to ensure the sample was taken correctly. I refused to let Eleanor anywhere near the process. Ethan and I swabbed Charlotte's cheek and Ethan's cheek. I packaged the samples, sealed them in front of Ethan, and mailed them myself, feeling a bitter, defiant satisfaction. The waiting period was agonizing. Every family dinner, every quiet moment, felt strained. Eleanor, sensing the escalation, grew smug. She called every few days, asking with fake sweetness, "Did the little package arrive safely, Clara? Are we close to getting those interesting family secrets uncovered?" I answered her with clipped politeness, giving nothing away. I watched her closely, observing the way she constantly sought Arthur's approval. a man who seemed to have faded into the background of his own home. Arthur was a ghost, gentle, always reading, rarely speaking. He'd look at me with sympathy in his eyes, but he never intervened in Eleanor's drama. She ran the show. She handled the finances, the social calendar, and the family's entire public narrative. Arthur simply nodded and kept his head down. I remember one Tuesday, Eleanor came over unannounced. She was inspecting our nursery, a common occurrence. She ran her finger along the edge of a bookcase. "You know, Clara," she said without turning around, "family assets, titles, and property hinge on legitimacy. It's simply prudent. Arthur's entire family line is everything to him." The mention of Arthur's name seemed to trigger something. I noticed a slight tremor in her left hand, which she quickly tucked under her arm. And then there was the smell. Not of perfume, but a faint, metallic scent that I couldn't place. It was fleeting, swallowed quickly by the lavender air freshener she carried in her handbag. I dismissed it as nerves, but the small details stayed with me. Eleanor was always pristine, always composed. The tremor, the strange smell, it didn't fit the grand inquisitor persona. 2 weeks later, the results arrived. I was alone when the courier delivered the thick, official envelope. I could hear my heart thumping against my ribs. I knew the results would clear me. The fear wasn't about the DNA. It was about the final, catastrophic confrontation with Eleanor that was about to happen. I opened the envelope. The first page confirmed what I already knew. Ethan was 99.999% the biological father of Charlotte. Triumph should have washed over me, but it was replaced by a hollow exhaustion. The fight was over, but the damage to my marriage was already done. I was looking for the phone to call Ethan when a separate, stapled report fell out from the back of the envelope. It was labeled, "Supplementary Marker Analysis, Paternal Line." Eleanor must have paid extra for a full genealogical breakdown. My eyes scanned the dense text, looking for something to justify her ridiculous expense. That's when I saw it. A single line, highlighted in the report, written not in the clinical language of genetics, but in a rushed, frantic handwritten note from the lab technician herself. It had an alarming circled annotation. Urgent. Markers suggest high probability of non-paternity on the grandfather's line. Immediate family counseling advised. I dropped the papers. The floor spun. My grandfather, Arthur. Eleanor's plan to destroy my family had just exposed the dark, central secret of her own life. I stared at the paper, feeling a strange, disorienting chill run through me. It was as if I had reached through a wall to slap Eleanor, but my hand had gone straight through her and struck the solid foundation of her entire life. I was cleared. Charlotte was Ethan's. But the report indicated that Arthur, the silent, gentle patriarch who ran the foundation of this wealthy, controlling family, was likely not Ethan's biological father. The report didn't state it outright, as Arthur had not provided a sample, but the supplementary markers compared Ethan's Y chromosome. The line passed exclusively from father to son, with common markers in the extended family. The mismatch was too significant to be an error. The handwritten note from the lab tech was the real confirmation. A human being warning us of the earthquake she had just unintentionally triggered. I felt a perverse sense of emotional whiplash. The initial shock of Eleanor's betrayal against me vanished, replaced by the sheer scale of the betrayal she had been living with and concealing for over 3 decades. Her entire life, the house, the legacy, the control, the constant, suffocating pursuit of perfection, was built on a monumental lie. I immediately hid the paper. I folded the results and the supplementary report, tucked them deep inside a rarely used kitchen cookbook, and waited. I didn't call Ethan. I needed time to process the consequences of this bomb. If I told Ethan, his entire identity would be shattered. If I told Eleanor, the result would be catastrophic. The silence in the house, usually a welcome quiet, now felt charged with a terrifying energy. When Ethan walked through the door that evening, I watched him closely. He was exhausted, expecting the confrontation. "Did they come?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I walked over to the cookbook and retrieved the main page. I handed it to him, my eyes steady on his face. He scanned the page, his shoulders visibly relaxing as he read the 99.999%. He let out a long, ragged breath and closed his eyes. "Thank God. Thank God, Clara. I'm so sorry. I should never have let her send it." "She knows," I said simply. "She knows the result already. We need to prepare for her phone call. She won't apologize. She'll pivot." And right on cue the phone rang. It was Eleanor. Ethan looked at me, a helpless plea in his eyes. I shook my head, silently urging him to be strong. He picked up. "Hello, Mother." His voice was firm, relieved. Eleanor's tone, surprisingly, was not aggressive, but coldly disappointed. I could hear every word clearly from the kitchen island. "Yes, Ethan. The lab notified me this afternoon. A strange error, wouldn't you say? Remarkable how genetics can produce such outliers. Still, it clears up that matter. We must simply accept that Charlotte got her features from some ancient, distant branch of our tree. She didn't apologize. She simply reframed the entire conflict, transforming her humiliating defeat into a sophisticated acceptance of a minor genetic quirk. She had no interest in my pain, only in maintaining her narrative. Ethan, however, was done. The relief of being cleared gave him the courage to finally push back. "No, Mother. It was not a strange error. It was a vicious, cruel act that you perpetrated against your own son and his wife. You will apologize to Clara." Now, there was a sharp, brittle laugh on the other end. "Don't be dramatic, darling. I have apologized enough for my generation's lack of foresight in these matters. Now, I simply called to tell you that I've decided to proceed with the transfer of the lakeside cottage deed to you, as promised, for your loyalty." The cottage, a beautiful family property that Ethan was supposed to inherit one day. She was trying to buy his forgiveness, to seal his silence with a huge financial bribe, as she always did. But her phrasing, "my generation's lack of foresight," made my blood run cold. Was this a slip? Was she referring to her own sin? 8. Ethan, focused only on his own pain, wasn't listening. "I don't want the cottage, Mother. I want you to be a decent human being for once." "Nonsense," she snapped, her mask dropping slightly. "Arthur will sign the papers next week. I insist. Goodbye, Ethan." She hung up, the click of the receiver sounding like a gunshot in our silent living room. Ethan threw the phone onto the sofa, utterly defeated. "She's impossible. She will never change. She'll just use the cottage to hold it over us forever." "She can't," I murmured, walking over to him. "She can't use the cottage, and she can't use her secrets, Ethan. Because I know her greatest one." His brow furrowed. "What are you talking about, Clara?" I went back to the cookbook, retrieved the stapled supplementary report, and laid it gently on his hands. "Ethan," I said, my voice soft but steady, "your mother demanded a DNA test to confirm Charlotte was your daughter. What she confirmed instead is that Arthur is not your father." Ethan's eyes scanned the page, stopping at the alarming handwritten note. His face went utterly blank, a chilling stillness replacing his usual animation. The world, for him, had just tilted violently on its axis. He didn't speak. He just stared at the page, and the sound of the grandfather clock in the hall ticking seemed impossibly loud. Ethan didn't speak for nearly 5 minutes. He simply stood there, immobile, the fluorescent light of the kitchen buzzing above his head, the paper shaking slightly in his hands. He was gazing at the report, but I knew he was looking 30 years into the past, watching his entire life narrative crumble. The quiet, gentle man I knew was gone, replaced by a ghost of a child realizing his entire existence was a fabrication orchestrated by the very woman who controlled his life. "No," he finally whispered, the sound raw and broken. He looked up at me, his eyes wide, searching for a lie. "No, this is impossible. It has to be an error." "It's from the same lab, Ethan," I said gently. "The one she chose. She overanalyzed the markers to make sure she wasn't being fooled, and this is what she accidentally found." I sat him down and explained what I had pieced together. Her over-the-top obsession with legacy, her constant need for control, her cold disappointment when Charlotte's features didn't match the family standard. It wasn't about my infidelity. It was about her deep-seated fear that her own infidelity would be exposed. She was projecting her guilt and hiding her own child's non-paternity behind the shield of mine. Her entire life had been a meticulously constructed defense mechanism. The rage that slowly built in Ethan wasn't loud, like mine had been. It was a cold, quiet fury that settled deep in his jaw. It wasn't the rage of a husband who was wronged, but the devastation of a son who was fundamentally lied to by his mother. "All those years," he ground out, pacing the hardwood floor. "All the pressure to be perfect, to uphold the family name, the continuous emotional blackmail. It was all a lie. She wasn't preparing me for life. She was managing me, making sure I never deviated from the script she wrote to protect her secret. I knew we had a choice. We could use this information as a silent weapon against Eleanor, forcing her to back off forever. Or we could detonate the truth. Given Eleanor's relentless cruelty, I knew silence would only sustain her power. She had tried to destroy my marriage and invalidate my daughter. She deserved the consequence of her own actions. "We need to know who," Ethan said, looking down at his own hands as if they didn't belong to him. "If Arthur isn't my father, who is?" This was the clever, calculated part of Eleanor's life. She hadn't just conducted an affair. She had erased all traces of it. We spent the next 3 days in a quiet, intense investigation. We didn't confront her. We didn't talk to Arthur. We went through old photo albums, old address books, and Eleanor's public society announcements from 30 years ago, searching for the anomaly. I noticed a recurring figure in the old photos, a man named Samuel Thorne. He was often at society parties, standing close to Eleanor, a handsome, charismatic man who was a successful, though slightly bohemian, professor of philosophy. He disappeared from the photos abruptly around the time Ethan was born. Crucially, Samuel Thorne had striking, dark, wavy black hair and sea-glass-colored eyes, almost identical to Charlotte's. "It makes sense," I murmured, sliding a photo of Thorne next to a photo of Charlotte. She saw Charlotte's hair and panicked. It wasn't just dark hair. It was his dark hair. Ethan, numb but determined, took the next action. Instead of calling Eleanor, he called Arthur. Arthur, the poor, silent ghost. "Dad," Ethan started, his voice thick with controlled emotion. "Clara and I got the genealogy results back. But there was a complication. I need to talk to you alone. Can you meet me at the old bookstore downtown tomorrow?" Arthur agreed immediately, his voice sounding strangely relieved, as if he had been waiting for this call for decades. The next day, Ethan met Arthur. I waited at home, the sound of the clock ticking echoing loudly in the silence. Ethan returned 3 hours later. He looked utterly drained, but there was a flicker of acceptance in his eyes. "He knew, Clara," Ethan whispered, collapsing onto the sofa. "He knew since I was 6 months old. Eleanor told him. Not because she was honest, but because he was threatening to leave, and she needed his money and his name. They made a pact. He keeps her secret, and she guarantees his status and the illusion of the perfect family." Arthur, it turned out, was a gentle man who had chosen financial security and social peace over truth. He confirmed Samuel Thorne's identity. He confirmed the cold, calculating nature of Eleanor's control. He was heartbroken for Ethan, but he had lost the moral right to intervene decades ago. With the truth confirmed, we knew we couldn't just keep it quiet. Eleanor had attempted a public execution of my character and my marriage. It was time for a public consequence. We needed to handle this with the elegance and dignity Arthur lacked, but with the necessary force to shut Eleanor down forever. The opportunity came a week later. Arthur's 70th birthday party, an enormous, meticulously planned affair at Eleanor's grand house, with every powerful and socially important member of their circle present. Eleanor's final chance to re-establish the perfect family narrative she so desperately guarded. Eleanor's plan to give Ethan the lakeside cottage wasn't an act of generosity. It was a preemptive strike to silence him. The day after their phone call, she scheduled a small, private dinner at her home to finalize the deed transfer, emphasizing the need for a celebratory toast with the family lawyer present. This was her attempt to regain control. Ethan and I attended, dressed impeccably. Arthur was there, looking frail and even quieter than usual. Eleanor was radiant, her face a mask of social perfection. The air was thick with the scent of lilies, and the unspoken deceit that permeated that house. The evening began with small talk about Charlotte's non-existent family resemblance, and the future of the legacy. When the lawyer, Mr. Hayes, cleared his throat and produced the deed papers for the cottage, Eleanor raised a crystal glass of champagne. To Arthur's generosity, she announced, her voice ringing slightly too loud. And to the future of our name. Ethan, you have always been such a loyal son. This cottage is a small token of our appreciation for your maturity. I watched Ethan. He was holding the full report beneath the table. His hands were steady. He gave her a polite, cold smile. Mother, that's incredibly generous, he said, the word generous dripping with irony. But before Arthur signs the deed, there's a small administrative matter. Since you're so focused on legitimacy and the purity of the family line, I need to share the complete, supplementary results of the DNA test you ordered for Charlotte. The room went silent. Eleanor's eyes, usually sharp, flickered with genuine terror. She tried to interrupt, a frantic, dismissive laugh catching in her throat. Ethan, darling, that's highly inappropriate. We cleared that matter up weeks ago. It was a simple genetic curiosity, nothing more. No, Mother. It wasn't about curiosity, Ethan countered, his voice steady but powerful. Cutting through her panic. He pulled out the papers, not just the clean report, but the stapled addendum with the handwritten note, and laid them on the polished mahogany table directly beneath the lawyer's nose. It was about proving Clara was a fraud to cover up the possibility that you were the fraud. He pointed to the crucial line in the report. The test cleared Charlotte and Clara, but it indicated a near certainty of non-paternity on the grandfather's line. Eleanor slammed her glass down. Champagne splashed across the papers. This is insane, Ethan. A forgery. Clara, you are twisting facts to destroy us. I am showing the facts you paid for, Mother, I interjected calmly, meeting her horrified gaze. The same genetic analysis you paid top dollar for to ensure your bloodline remained pure, is what exposed your 30-year secret. Arthur, who had been sitting quietly at the end of the table, finally spoke. His voice was a low, defeated rumble. Eleanor. Stop. It's time. Eleanor looked at her husband, the man whose name, money, and social standing she had used as a fortress for her lie. She saw not the mild-mannered man she controlled, but the only person left who truly knew the depths of her deception. Her carefully constructed facade shattered. She looked small, panicked, stripped bare. Arthur, you traitor, she spat, tears of pure, furious shame streaming down her perfectly composed face. You promised. You swore you'd never let the name suffer. Ethan leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. The name didn't suffer, Mother. You suffered because you couldn't trust anyone, even your own son. You inflicted your betrayal on me and my wife, because you were afraid of the truth getting out. We know about Samuel Thorne. We know everything." The lawyer, Mr. Hayes, quietly gathered the deed papers, his face a careful mask of professionalism. He knew this transaction was dead. Ethan didn't want vindication. He wanted emancipation. "You don't get to buy my silence with that cottage, Mother. And you don't get to manipulate me with this family name anymore. I don't need your legacy, because Arthur raised me. And Arthur is the only father I ever truly needed." He took Arthur's trembling hand and held it. That evening, Eleanor didn't just lose a secret. She lost her absolute authority. The betrayal she orchestrated to protect herself became the very instrument of her undoing. The house, her temple of perfection, became the stage for her most profound public humiliation. The confrontation didn't end with screaming or physical violence. It ended with a devastating, profound silence that only absolute truth can deliver. Mr. Hayes left swiftly, taking the cottage deed with him. Arthur simply gripped Ethan's hand, his eyes welling up with tears that had been held back for 70 years. Eleanor, after her initial outburst, retreated into a cold, frightening stillness. She didn't speak another word to us that night. She simply walked out of the room, up the grand mahogany staircase, and the heavy door to her master bedroom clicked shut. Ethan and I went home, not victorious, but profoundly exhausted. The victory wasn't sweet, it was necessary. The fallout was swift and permanent. The news, though not spread via social media, traveled with remarkable speed through the tight-knit social circles that Eleanor valued above all else. A few weeks later, we learned that the family lawyer had discreetly handled the legal dissolution of Arthur and Eleanor's financial arrangement. The lakeside cottage, which was always meant to be Ethan's, was transferred directly from Arthur to Ethan, bypassing Eleanor entirely. For Arthur, the revelation brought a bittersweet freedom. He moved out of the pristine, silent house and into a cozy apartment near his old university, finally able to spend his days reading and painting. Hobbies Eleanor had always dismissed as unproductive. He and Ethan started building a real relationship, based not on pretense but on the shared, painful truth. Arthur may not have been Ethan's biological father, but he was the man who had stayed, the man who ultimately confessed, and the man who truly earned the title of father that night. Eleanor, isolated and shunned by the very social structures she maintained, found herself with nothing but her empty, beautiful house and her legacy of lies. She tried to call Ethan several times, but her attempts were always manipulative. Never an apology, only demands for silence and discretion. Ethan finally changed his number. For our own little family, the healing began the moment we closed the door on Eleanor's influence. Ethan had to redefine his entire identity. He started seeing a counselor, something I encouraged. The man who had always been so steady was now navigating the reality that his life was built on a deliberate lie. He struggled with anger, grief, and the profound sense of being erased. My role was simply to be his anchor. I never rubbed the truth in his face, never reminded him that his mother's cruelty had backfired. Instead, I focused on building our real legacy, a home where honesty was the foundation. I would look at Charlotte's beautiful, dark hair and her sea glass eyes, and instead of seeing the source of conflict, I saw the beautiful, undeniable truth of the world. Life always finds a way, even if it comes through unexpected lineage. The most profound lesson I learned was that control is a fortress built on fear, and truth is the wrecking ball. Eleanor controlled everything because she was terrified of what she had done 30 years ago. In her desperate attempt to assert dominance, she provided the weapon that led to her own emotional downfall. We found our quiet victory not in her shame, but in our renewed commitment to each other. Ethan learned that he didn't need a name or a legacy to be a good man. He just needed to be true. He finally stood up for me, for our child, and most importantly for himself. Today, years later, our lives are peaceful. Charlotte is thriving, and she has two wonderful grandfathers. My own kind father and Arthur, who visits often with small hand-painted gifts. I still drive past Eleanor's grand house sometimes. It looks exactly the same, pristine, perfect, and utterly, profoundly empty. The irony is not lost on me. The woman who was obsessed with the purity of her family line was the one who poisoned it. And the truth she sought to bury was the one that finally set me free. I hope that my story, however complex and dramatic, offers a simple lesson. When faced with toxic control, do not hide from the truth. Face it, and use it with dignity. Sometimes the cruelest people pay the highest price for their own actions. Which city are you listening from? Tell me in the comments, and share if you've ever had a toxic family member's cruel plan backfire on them. I hope that after every story, your heart feels a little lighter, knowing that you are not alone in your struggle. If my story touched your heart, don't forget to like and share. Thank you for listening.